Welcome everyone to our second Landcare Lunchbreak webinar of the summer. Presenting today is Will Everitt from Friends of Casco Bay. We're excited to have him here today. He'll be covering the relationship between water and land care.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. Friends of Casco Bay this has been a big issue for us for a long time. And for those of you who don't know, Friends of Casco Bay's mission is to improve and protect the environmental health of Casco Bay, which makes the city of Portland, in fact, Portland, but Casco Bay stretches from Cape Elizabeth in the southeast to Phippsburg along the coast in the northwest. That so includes all those towns in between. And the watershed goes as far west as Bethel, Maine, up in the mountains, which means if you poured some water out on the ground up in Bethel, it may eventually end up in Casco Bay. And I have a little presentation here that I'm going to share some images and some of our data, because Friends of Casco Bay, we collect scientific data on the health of the bay, and we use that data in our advocacy to reduce pollution. So I'd like to encourage people to think about how the bay, our coastal waters, really begin at your front lawn, and I'll share why we care about this. But for me, I've been working at Friends of Casco Bay since 2006. The issue of pesticides and fertilizers are near and dear to my heart because I grew up on a farm so I grew up close to the earth, but also ironically had my commercial pesticide applicators license. I was a conventional apple farm that my father still runs. I got my commercial pesticide applicators license soon after getting my driver's license. And I think after going up to college and having some perspective, realized, wow, we really used some really pretty dangerous chemicals to ourselves and to the environment. I am going to share some problems, especially in terms of our water, our marine water, though. The waters off Portland, the problem with pesticides and fertilizers, and some of the solutions, and take questions. And Anna, from there, you can throw questions in the chat as I move along, or it's such a small group of us online today too. You can unmute and ask me as we move along. So, but let's start with pesticides and fertilizers. But a lot of people who are taking care of their lawn might just think of that, oh, I'm just using fertilizers on my lawn. But a lot of lawn care chemicals are both weed and feed. And the weed part is pesticides, herbicides that kill weeds. All herbicides are pesticides. Pesticides could also include insecticides, fungicides. And the feed part of the weed and feed is the fertilizers feeding the lawn. We're going to start off with the pesticide side of why we care. And Friends of Casco Bay, we've collected a lot of data, collecting samples from stormwater runoff running into urban streams. Here's our staff scientist, Mike Doan, taking a sample in Greater Portland area here. And what we have found in every place that we sampled, which included runoff from South Portland, Falmouth, Cumberland, Yarmouth, Freeport, Brunswick, every site that we sampled in 13 neighborhoods around the bay had detects for pesticides. Most of these are lawn care pesticides. We weren't measuring. This was a survey to find out what was flowing into the bay. So this was presence or absence samples. So in other words, if we got to detect it, we could identify what the chemical was, not necessarily the amount of it in the water, but just that the chemical existed. So that's what this chart is. Why are we concerned about that? Because of so much depends upon the bay, and none of these pesticides that we're getting into the bay were put there on purpose. They're not meant for use in marine waters. And think about all the jobs out there of lobstermen like this guy, Jack Thomas. Dr. Bob Baer, who's the founder of the Maine Lobster Institute, had a lot to say about pesticides. Think of lobsters as bugs too. Essentially, from an evolutionary standpoint, they aren't that much different from insects and the bugs on your lawn. So that when lawn care pesticides are flowing into our waters, they could kill our lobsters. Um, in very small amounts. So that's on the pesticide side. Let's flip to the fertilizer side uh, of lawn care chemicals for a second. Here you're looking at one of the many uh, clam flats in Casco Bay. And one of the major things that we talk about occasionally is the rise of slime, of nuisance algae. And algae there's macroalgae and there's microscopic algae. Uh, Microscopic algae is essentially a plant in the water, and it's just like how the nitrogen and fertilizers encourages grass to grow more. Nitrogen in our seawater makes algae grow like crazy, and we can see the impact that we as people along the coast are having. You don't need to worry necessarily about the numbers here, but we've done sampling across the bay of nitrogen levels in Casco Bay. And the thing to just take away from this, that green means essentially a relatively healthy level of nitrogen. Nitrogen, all living things, including ourselves, need nitrogen. Uh, so it is a good thing, but too much of it is a bad thing. So if you look at this map, essentially the closer you are to Portland and other kind of more urban areas, you see that the nitrogen levels are go up. This is because of stormwater, potentially because of stormwater runoff from our land and our lawns. It's also a little more pollution coming from our the air being absorbed into our waters and from sewage overflows. All those things contain nitrogen. So eelgrass is a key habitat in the bay. This is what eelgrass looks like under the water. Most of us never see eelgrass because just in the intertidal zone, only on extreme low tides might you see eelgrass growing, but it is a key habitat for lobster and juvenile fish, lobster and clams and snails, and most of the commercial fish species spend their juvenile days hiding out in eelgrass. Eelgrass helps maintain sediment and uh, uh, stops erosion. It helps store carbon. It's a really key habitat out in the bay. The problem is that nitrogen, which again is in lawn care fertilizer, um, too much nitrogen makes eelgrass grow strangly and die. So high levels of nitrogen could impact our eelgrass. We're super concerned about that because over the past 4 years, well, since 2018, we've lost 54% of all of our eelgrass in Casco Bay. That's from the Maine Department of Environmental Protection surveys. We're not entirely sure why. Part of it could be temperature, part of it could be green crabs, part of it could be nitrogen or other pollutants affecting it. We are out over the next 2 summers collecting more data on trying to understand the problem so we can restore those eelgrass beds. But a key thing to help this vital habitat that you may have never heard of before, but is so key to everything that's out there in the bay, is not using lawn care fertilizers. Because if you aren't putting fertilizers would contain nitrogen on your lawn in the first place, they won't go into the bay and they won't harm this vital habitat. So how's it get out in the bay? This is probably it's not the greatest shot, but this is a view from Munjoy Hill, the eastern prom, looking out on Pomeroy Rock in Casco Bay. That's the view you have when you're strolling the prom here in Portland. The thing is, when it rains, uh, flush a lot of chemicals from our lawns, the waste and oil and other things end up on our roads and essentially wash them into the bay. So that first view from the Eastern Prom was on a beautiful day, and there hadn't been any rain. This is a view, and this happens a lot when we get really rainy days. Suddenly the bay is stained with a coffee stain, essentially, and you can see that in this photo where it's blue, 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 and then suddenly a really different color, brownish color. And that is the impact of stormwater. And part of that is because fresh water floats on top of salt water. And so this rain flowing in, washing sediment and other things that, normally we want the bay to look blue and bluish green, not this brown color. So it's through storms and rainstorms that chemicals that you put on your lawn can end up being washed into the bay. So you've heard me talk a lot about nitrogen and our fertilizers. Chemical fertilizers contain nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. We pick on nitrogen a lot in our marine waters. In marine waters, it's nitrogen that makes too much algae grow. In fresh water, such as streams or lakes, it's phosphorus. But in both cases, if you are not using fertilizers on your lawns, in both cases, you are protecting our fresh water and our steep waters. So what in the world, what's the connection between the nitrogen and the algal blooms? I showed you how the stormwater runs into the bay. It's bringing with it excess nitrogen, which you can see how it's flowing from our streets and our lawns. It's flowing from our agricultural fields. It's also flowing from our stormwater pipes and our sewage pipes into the bay. And that nitrogen is like it's fertilizer on your lawn, it's fertilizing the bay and it causes big blooms, algal blooms. And those blooms, and here's nuisance algal bloom, can cover our clam flats with this bright green slime. Essentially, it's algae, nuisance algae. And this is taken and just across Portland Harbor in South Portland. Here's one of our interns holding up, showing you how thick these algal mats can grow. And too much nitrogen causes too much of these algal mats to grow. They are essentially choking the mudflats and choking the clams, killing the crabs and the other sea life that depend upon those. In fact, here is a dead clam that our intern's holding up that was smothered to death by these algal mats. The other problem with this algae is that when algae blooms, it doesn't have a long life. It dies relatively quickly. And when it dies, bacteria eat it and release carbon dioxide. So there's a climate change and acidification connection between our lawn care chemicals and our marine waters. So if we're using too much nitrogen on fertilizers on our lawns, it's flowing off into the bay, it's causing these blooms die, bacteria eat them and release carbon dioxide, just like carbon dioxide released from our factories and power plants and cars is causing our oceans to become more acidic. Too much nitrogen, that whole process can lead to our waters becoming acidic and killing clams and other life that depend upon less acidic marine waters. Again, here's another example of an algal mat. Just actually, this picture is in Portland. It's in Falmouth, but it's taken from near a lawn that was essentially heavily fertilized. And when we talked to the homeowner and got them to stop fertilizing their lawn and keep the runoff from flowing into the bay, this mat disappeared. It's a really good cause and effect of what in the world our lawn care chemicals are doing. On the acidification front, this is a baby clam. We did a research project a number of years ago where we took baby clams grown in a lab so that they're pretty healthy and put them out on mudflats that were being affected by these algal mats and other things. And you can see we dug them up after 2 to 4 weeks, and you can see this is the same clam just a couple weeks later with its shell pitted, and it's pitted because of the acidification. Again, that nitrogen causing a bloom, the bloom dying, releasing carbon dioxide, and making essentially the waters and our clam flats more acidic, pitting the shells. So. Portland, we are so thankful that Portland passed a lawn care ordinance. Portland is not alone. My former executive director, my predecessor, Kathy Ramsdell, sat on the task force that helped draft early versions of the ordinance that the city of Portland eventually adopted. So Friends of Casco Bay worked really closely with the city of Portland as it adopted its lawn care ordinance. But Portland's not alone. Scarborough has been working to reduce pesticides in lawn care. Harpswell in the Bay, Kennebunkport, Camden, Maine, South Portland, of course, which is what Portland's ordinance, lawn care ordinance, is based on South Portland's, which we helped work on as well at Friends of Casco Bay. Falmouth, and then our program at Friends of Casco Bay to encourage people to stop using pesticides and fertilizers. It's called our Bayscaping program, and we give out these signs to people who pledge to not use pesticides and fertilizers and to bayscape their lawns. So we have a number of volunteers who are out there around the bay leading by example and keeping pesticides and fertilizers out of their lawns. And on our website, I won't go through them in this presentation, but on our website, we have a number of different tips going through all the seasons. So for example, right now we're in summer, an easy way to keep your lawn healthy without pesticides and fertilizers is watering it each week and then cutting your lawn high, letting the grass grow to 3 or 4 inches. Too many people cut the grass short, and the longer the grass blades are, the healthier your lawn will be and won't need the pesticides and fertilizers. But on our website at cascobay.org, we have a number of different tips for ways to keep your lawn, tips for growing green lawns that keep Casco Bay blue through the fall, the winter, and the spring. But all the tips begin, and this is the most important thing homeowners could do as thinking about their lawns and gardens, is before fertilizing them, even before putting organic compost in your lawns or gardens. The first step to all of this, it's like going to your doctor and finding out what your blood pressure and your vital signs are. So what are the vital signs of your soil? And the University of Maine does a relatively inexpensive way for you to find that out, where you essentially test your soil, and that involves getting a box from them. You fill this box up with soil from your lawn, you close the box, you mail it to them, and then in a couple of weeks they send back to you how healthy your soil is. And if you wrote that you want to take care of it organically, would give recommendations for what you would need to keep your soil healthy. Because this is the key thing: if your soil is healthy, your lawn will grow healthy, your garden will grow healthy, and you won't need the synthetic fertilizers and pesticides that so many people depend on. So in addition to growing green lawns that keep Casco Bay blue, the other way for you to help keep our water safe is through keeping water from running off your house and running off your driveways and the streets into Casco Bay. So we talk about stormwater pollution. 200 years ago, we would use the word stormwater pollution, because we wouldn't have had so much pavement and houses everywhere. Rain would fall and be naturally filtered through the ground. Right now, with our built environment, our houses and our roads and our driveways, that rain is not filtering through the ground. It is hitting these things and then blasting pollution into our water. So a key thing to do is to help that water help filter it. You can do that by having a rain barrel. You collect the water, and then you can water your lawn and garden from that rain barrel. You can have a rain garden, where essentially you're at the lowest spot on your property, where the water flowing down and flows into special plants and special garden to keep to essentially filter the water through having a good buffer, especially if you live along a coast or live along a urban stream. Having a big buffer between your lawn and your driveway and the water, and having a permeable pavement, so pavement that lets the rainwater infiltrate, filter into the ground. And that's what our bayscapers around the bay pledge to do. And that's our major concerns with lawn care chemicals, the pesticides and fertilizers flowing to the bay and how they affect the bay. And we're so glad that Portland has an ordinance that's doing education about helping our residents protect the bay. So with that, I'll take questions as people have them and go from there.
I had a quick question. Something that we've been asked a few times is if there's any like research or things, like are you seeing any improvements in like water quality as more and more towns and cities are, implementing ordinances and increasing education campaigns, things like that? It's something that's difficult for us to be able to measure, and I'm just curious if
Yeah,
you
that's a
all are
great
able to.
question. That's a great question. The quick answer, that's hard to tease out. Well, one thing I didn't, I'll mention this in a second, but I talked about the nuisance algal blooms, and the nuisance algal blooms are a really good indicator of too much nitrogen, right? They're an indicator that too much nitrogen is coming into our waters. So, uh, uh, but if an algal bloom happens, it doesn't necessarily mean, okay, is this from lawn care chemicals? Is it from sewage overflows? Is it from a septic tank that's leaking? Is it from dog waste or duck waste?
Mhm.
Mill. Uh, uh, there are some places that just kind of naturally more nitrogen, just because there's naturally more wildlife in that area. But so that's a long, long. Who knows the answer? I will
Mhm.
say though that last year, we have a program called Water Reporter, where we have volunteers who use an app on their smartphones and help us track the health of the bay through collecting observational data. Our staff is collecting the scientific data using data sondes, equipment, and probes that we stick in the water. But those numbers don't always tell the whole story. And so having photos of how the bay is changing helps. Last year was the first year that we didn't see very many nuisance algal blooms in the greater Portland area. Is that because people are using less nitrogen or less fertilizers? Is it because the East End wastewater treatment plant has been doing a really great job at denitrifying our waste that's going there? Is it because last summer you might remember how dreary it was, and we had so much rain, right? And counterintuitively, you'd think with all that rain, there's more stormwater pollution going into the bay. Maybe we'd have more nuisance algal blooms than ever because of that. But in addition to needing nitrogen to grow, these plants, microscopic plants in the water, and the nuisance, the microalgae, need sunlight too, just like our grass, and all of us need sunlight. And there wasn't much sunlight last summer. So was it because there wasn't much summer? So we're really interested this summer, which looks like to be a more normal, though hotter than normal, but more normal summer so far, knock on wood. So we have really our volunteers out there looking for tracking these nuisance algal blooms. So that's another way that you can help protect the bay is going to our website, cascobay.org, and look at our Water Reporter program. You download an app onto your phone, take photos of, presence or absence. So, I'm at East End Beach and I see nothing green. I'm at, I'm along an urban stream and where it runs into the Pasumscot, and I see a lot of green. You're taking a photo of it, and our science staff will go out to those sites when we see a lot of nuisance algal blooms and try to figure out why is this happening? Is that happening? And a lot of times it's leading us to a lawn with too much fertilizer, a agricultural field with too much fertilizer. It's leading us to a leaky septic, or it's leading us to a stormwater pipe. Often, not always, but often. Yeah. Great question.
I just wanted to say that was a fantastic presentation. I feel like you touched on a lot of the things that we talk about with our land care ordinance. And yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned like mowing a little bit taller too. That's something we've been pushing as a campaign called Mow Tall Until Fall. And I think people are actually kind of starting to get it since it has just a variety of benefits to your soil health and lawn. But no, I thought that was a great presentation. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Katie.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for coming on and doing this presentation today. I'm also really glad you brought up the soil testing, because our last webinar was the step-by-step how to test your soil and how to interpret your results, and that's available on our website as well. And we'll be posting this recording.
Yeah, that's so key. Like you wouldn't go. There's a reason why you can't go to the pharmacy and just grab a random prescription, right? Like your doctor's got to say, hey, you need this, so go take this. And getting a lawn care, getting your soil tested is like having a doctor tell you what you need, or not. Hey, you're healthy. You don't need to do anything. So yeah, very key. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the time, and thanks for caring about our soils. Our healthy soils make for a healthy Casco Bay. So
yeah, that's the goal.
Yep. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.